everyone, welcome back. This is the fourth. Look, I'm losing count now. No, it's the fourth. So this is the fourth installment in the value series. So if you are just joining us, I have a playlist that is attached to the end of the video where you can join into the discussion in all the ways that and I'm sure you too have been devalued over your life. Either by society, by family, by peers, just through various experiences. And so we've talked about, just to do a really quick recap, we've talked about being born to a single teenage mother, the food, intelligence level, being not white, being low class, living in poverty, where I lived, in St. Louis, where I grew up, my age, the way that I look, young face, but obese. Previously, I had a lot of health issues and I was incredibly overweight. So that's something that I have been working to overcome. My inability to speak more than one language fluently. I do speak multiple languages, but not near the capacity of being able to carry on a very long conversation. Being a single parent, my degree, my religion, my spirituality, the list is very long. So now I want to talk about how I was devalued even in marriage. Now, being devalued in a relationship. So I'm not gonna talk about really specific things because I'm not ready for that yet. But what I do want to talk about is the societal and the familiar pressure on the man to quote unquote be a man and perpetuate what's called toxic masculinity. So this is the first time that I'm bringing this up. There are lots of really amazing documentaries on PBS. I will tell you this, because if you have been on my channel for a while, I'm really nerdy. And so I call myself a docu-nerd where I watch a lot of documentaries. I don't like sitcoms. People are like, have you seen Friends? And I'm like, no, I've watched maybe a half of an episode and I'm not a sitcom person. I don't like to watch TV other than for documentaries. So in toxic masculinity, it's basically our culture and our society has put an emphasis on the value a man should have. What this has done in turn, tell that man in his man brain that you're not a man unless XYZ, 1, 2, 3, ABC, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this programming or this messaging that men grow up with, especially in certain cultures and in certain segments of US culture, can be incredibly damaging because a man then says, I don't have value unless I am this. Back in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, early 90s, again, this is kind of who I'm speaking to here. A man needs to be the provider. A man needs to be the protector. A man needs to do all of these things, which in a certain capacity is true. But as soon as a man would, like, for example, lose his job, the man can no longer provide for the family. And then automatically he is, in his mind, placed in a devalued situation. Okay. There also has been this, the man is the final decision maker. So The man will make the decision and the wife essentially has to live with it. The man is the one who makes the decisions for even the kids. The wife has very little ability to be a co-parent or a co-partner, which is a much healthier relationship style versus a very patriarchal view. Okay, so a very male dominated view of how marriage and relationships should work. Okay, this has done so much damage to our society. Again, I encourage you, do your research on toxic masculinity and what that looks like, and especially how it perpetuates through our society. You're not a man if, grow a pair, right? Be a man about it. All of those phrases and all of those ideologies are very hurtful, and they're not just hurtful for the man, but they're also very hurtful for the family. So I was devalued in my marriage by society, having those ideas of what does it mean to be a man, right? So if a man is somewhat emotional, like if let's say if his mother died and he cried about it, like calling him a pussy or a sissy or suck it up, like men were not allowed to express any type of emotion whatsoever whenever I was growing up. And if you did, then you were less than, right? And so again, using something that is as natural as emotions, it's actually the way that we need to navigate through our whole entire existence essentially, is through our feelings. We have to feel our way through life. Became very damaging. And so through society's point of view, but then also through the point of view of my peers, because of course that sinks into what the people around you think, what your family thinks, right? And so whenever I started to have problems within my marriage because of these institutionalized thoughts and beliefs being imposed upon us, I was the one who was causing problems. I was controlling. I was, overly emotional. I was irrational. A lot of people will resonate with the overly sensitive, overly emotional, irrational woman, right? That stereotype, women can't make decisions because they're too emotional, right? So if a man was too emotional, then he would be like a woman, right? So again, devaluing women, but devaluing men that have emotional intelligence, right? Because what was valued was intellectual intelligence. And so, again, like going through society and even in my marriage, being devalued and not really having a place, but then also within religion. In religion, a woman has her place, a woman has her role, a woman has her job that she has to fulfill as part of her duties and obligations to God, right? And so this is where, especially, I have pulled away from religion and religious ideals because I no longer resonate with any of those things. You're a good wife if you this, based on a man's perception of what a good wife is, and because like now I haven't been married in such a long time, now I have a very different perception or perspective of the way that a relationship should function, and the way that a man and a woman communicate, and a man being able to be vulnerable with his emotions. I had, unfortunately, in my family, there was a lot of gun violence, and my grandfather and my uncle both took their lives, right? And I'm sure that a lot of it had to do with the fact that they couldn't go to therapy because, going to therapy meant that you had problems and that you're emotionally unstable and you're just like a woman, right? Like, you see how these ideas directly translate into the way that it plays out in our society and the way that it plays out in our personal lives. And so, again, as a child, I had a lot of that trauma of, um, you know, the way that society imposed on the people in my family and what the ramifications of that was. But then also, my stepdad, he was really artistically creative and he wasn't able to like show any of that, right? Because he had to be about guns and he had to be about sorry, I had to edit out where I was coughing. So, he grew up not being able to be emotionally sensitive and really kind of diving in. But then whenever he was older and he didn't have those pressures any longer, you should see how explosively creative he had gotten. I mean, he would sculpt things out of wood, he would build furniture out of wood, he would quilt, he would do all kinds of stuff that was like quilting. Can you believe this man is such a master quilter? And that was a woman's thing whenever I was a kid, right? But he was really, really good at it. My kids have blankets that he made. And so, again, it was like all of these different pressures on men in our society, where if they didn't live up to societal expectations, they were devalued, but then the woman was devalued through that process. Okay. The next thing here is not being valued for my time. Don't fall into this trap, people. Don't fall into the, hey, can you do me a favor? Hey, can you help me out? Hey, can you, like, you can be nice and you can do things, but if it starts to become perpetual, like that person is just all the time asking you for things, your time is precious. Okay. Time is the most precious thing that we have. It's the only thing that we can not get back ever. Okay. We cannot get back time, right? The time that you spend watching or doing or participating or interacting or whatever, that time is time past that you cannot then say, oh, let me do that again. Let me just go back in time. Let me snatch out that piece and let me try it again. Okay. You have to be very cautious and very careful of how you're using your time and your energy, because at the end of the day, no one knows when they're going to die. No one. No one knows whenever it's time to go. Like, I don't know, right? Like, when I leave my house today, is that going to be it? I don't know. How are you going to decide to live your life? Are you going to decide to live your life where you're doing a lot of extraneous things for other people that then take away from you and devalue what you're trying to do? Or are you going to have time for yourself and boundaries and say, hey, I'll help you out this one time, but next time you're going to have to call somebody else? Or, hey, I'm going to dedicate this time slot to you, and I don't want to hear or participate outside of that time slot, right? Like, you need to be really careful with your boundaries. The same thing with your resources. So your money, your time is a resource, but I'm speaking specifically about your money and your actual personal things, and having really clear boundaries around all of those. Like, I knew somebody that every time you would go to their house, they would give you something. Don't kind of like fall into that, because then people start to be very dependent, you know. And that's a way that they need to learn how to go out for themselves and get their own resources, and they need to figure out a way to utilize their own time, have better boundaries, have better time management, right? Um, and so, again, don't devalue your own. This is where I devalued myself, right? So I devalued my own time. I devalued my own resources. I've devalued my own advice. I've devalued my own boundaries. I have devalued my own contributions, right? And so before we were kind of talking about other people, but then now we're kind of venturing into all the ways that through societal programming, I devalued myself because I grew up that, you give to others, whenever others come to you, you need to give your charity, right? This is kind of the dangerous part of the religious part where you need to do charity, like it's godly to do charitable work, but what's not godly is to give away everything that you have in order to support others, because what you're ending up doing is you're creating a situation where that person becomes dependent. So you don't want to create a codependency. You want to create an empowerment situation where you can say, hey, you know what, I'll help you this one time, but let me show you how to do it so next time you know how to do it yourself. Or, hey, I'm going to give you advice, and then I'm going to give you some other resources of places where you can get further help if you need it, and then kind of releasing that person to kind of go and figure it out on their own, because people need to experience their own life for themselves. If you create a codependent situation, then that person doesn't have the ability or doesn't ever learn the ability of how to go out and get for themselves. They're always going to rely on you. It's kind of like whenever you feed a stray cat. Actually, this is what happened to me. I'll tell you. This is a funny story. Whenever I was little, I don't know how old I was. I fed a stray cat in my apartment complex, and then like that cat the next night, and my mom can testify to this, the next night that cat came back and there were tons of cats. There were tons of cats everywhere. And they were all scratching at the door to get food. Okay. So don't create a codependent relationship with the people around you. Empower them and help them, show them, teach them, guide them in order to get for themselves so that they're not dependent. And then they in turn can then educate and inspire others with the things that they learn in their own life. But also people have devalued my advice where I said, do this or don't do that. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone gets to make their own choice, but don't repeat it. Like, if you're not going to take my advice, don't come back repeatedly asking me for advice, right? Like, that's a waste of my time. Again, time suck, right? And then, like, especially the boundaries are a huge thing, because we as a society have not really learned how to have healthy boundaries with others. And so whenever your boundaries are devalued, whenever you say, I'm not going to anymore, and then that person's like, yeah, just one more time, something like that. No, make sure that you are valuing your own boundaries and sticking up for yourself. My opinion, the same thing. My opinion, my personal opinion about things, my professional expertise has been devalued again, from being a teacher and teaching not being a valued profession in our society, even though it's the profession that creates all other professions, it not being valued. That has been, something that has really rubbed me the wrong way, especially recently, with the way that teachers continue to be devalued in this country, the kinds of things that we go through. Just to give you an example, one of my coworkers in the past, she had cancer. No one knew. She was showing up to school every single day. And she was dedicated to those kids and making sure that they had consistent education. And then one day she just didn't come to school and no one knew what happened to her. And then one of the other teachers, luckily, had found out. that she died, that she had been going through chemotherapy and radiation the entire time that she was teaching. She she always scheduled her appointments after school or before school. So no one knew ever. And these are the kinds of things that teachers really go through, but we compartmentalize what's happening in our personal lives in order to put our students first. Okay. And so that's been like, it's even whenever we went on strike a few years ago, and then now the governor has kind of undone all of that we went to strike for. It just kind of is incredibly frustrating. Also, the fact that like my mom, she has an associate's degree, but she works as a secretary for a corporation, and she makes more money than I do as a teacher with a master's degree and 15 years of experience. So it's, that's another way that society has devalued my professional expertise, but also just against other professions. So whenever I was working with a profession that I won't name, a lot of those people in that profession were like, you're just a teacher, what do you know? Okay, even though same education level, same number of years of experience, I wasn't valued for my professional expertise in that arena. And then just random personal choices that I have made, right? Just random personal choices, just not being valued, that I know what I'm talking about in my life, that I know what I'm doing in my life, the way that I choose to live my life. Again, this one kind of tips the scales for certain court rulings that were just given out, where personal choice and freedom of personal choice is being removed, not just from certain genders, but also certain sexual orientations and things like that. And so, you really can tell what the values of the people that are in charge are whenever they undo things that have been done. And so you really have to ask yourself, okay, at a societal level, is this something that I want to continue to participate in? Is this something that I'm going to continue to value? Or is this something that I'm going to try to work to change? And yes, of course, there are a lot of people that understand that if we are really a free country, then we have freedom of choice, no matter what those choices are, even whenever the arguments, because this is what they do. Well, you have personal choice. Okay. So if I had a gun, if I go out and I get a gun right now today, and this is not a anti-gun thing, this is just an example. So if I go out and get a gun today, even though I am a registered sex offender, for example, okay, or I have some kind of history of domestic violence, I can have a gun and that's fine, but it's my free personal choice to do so. And then if my free personal choice, then I decide to commit a crime with that gun or homicide or something like that, then there's a problem. But it was my choice to do that, right? Whereas in certain capacities, personal choice is thwarted before, we're now preventing things from happening before they have an opportunity to happen, because now you're saying that when given the choice, we know you're going to make that decision, so we're going to stop it right here, right? And so the narrative serves who the narrative serves at the time that it serves that person. And so this is also, not only does this play out at a societal level, but this also plays out at a personal level, because this is how then people are programmed to think, is that it's okay for you to impose on my personal choice. Okay. No matter what that personal choice is, I don't care. Like for me, I don't care what anybody thinks or does, or any of, like, your life is your life. And that's, it has no bearing on me whatsoever, other than whenever it's obviously like society itself making those decisions. And so we can change those things as a society for sure. It's going to take time. And it is like over my lifespan, we have evolved to have lots of different values, and those values are constantly changing. And so, you know, I really encourage you that you sit and you think about all the ways that you have been devalued in it, again, from society, from your family, from your peers. How have you devalued yourself? And then you really start to work through that trauma to bring healing to your soul, because these times that we're living in, this is what we're all being called to do at this time, is to kind of heal the past. And so how do we move forward? And you can kind of see where healing the past, there are people that are standing against that. They want the status quo. They want the way that things have been done this entire time. And so, we have the power to change that, but first we have to change that within ourselves. And then we have to go out and inspire others with our changed selves, and the way that we behave, and the way that we think, and what we value. And we have to band together, and we have to say, this is the change that we want to see, moving forward. We're going to raise our kids differently with different values. We're going to raise our kids in a way that we're not going to make the mistakes of the past, or we're not going to take away personal choice, or we're not going to devalue people for the personal choices that they make in their life. So I hope that you found this series to be incredibly helpful. I did have one last thing on the list. So if you just want to hang out, or, if it's been too long, you can go ahead and go. But one last thing that I do want to add in is that the medical system, being devalued by the medical system, because throughout my life, being chronically ill, and I always do my research before I go to the doctor's office, and that way I go prepared to have a conversation and be able to understand what the doctor is talking to me about. But even having that kind of knowledge, especially whenever I had long COVID and I went to the doctor and I said, hey, I have long COVID, let's run these different tests and kind of see what's going on. And he completely devalued and dismissed me as a patient. I'm sure that many of you have had the same kinds of situations where you've gone in to go talk to your doctor that you had a valid concern, and that you were written off that, your heart condition is due to high cholesterol. Like me, but surprise, it was long COVID, right? And the histamine reaction that my body was having. So, again, advocacy is really important for yourself for all of these things. So with this, I'm going to close the series, 4 videos long. Thank you so much for watching, for liking, sharing, subscribing. And I hope to see you back for another video or another series. If this content is helpful, please like, share, and like, share, and subscribe. It has been my pleasure to be able to get this information out to the people that really need it. Thanks so much, and have a great day.